Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Avowed. I play on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Xbox Series S and PC. So in Avowed, you play as an Adherin envoy. You are sent to the living lands due to this thing called the Dream Scourge, which is this kind of horrible plague that turns people into weird, crazy zombie type things. Think, well, the crazies. You are sent there by the Emperor to basically investigate and try and find out what's going on with this Dream Scourge, what it is, what kind of threat it is, and how to basically cure it, defeat it, whatever you need to do to stop it, essentially. And that's really the end of the story. No, I'm kidding. It's not that simple. Of course, there's weird twists and turns along the way. There's the Steel Garrote. There's all the different characters you run into. There's the different towns and areas with their own political and social needs and all of that going on. And then you've got the Adherins there, just making it more complicated because they're kind of foreign invaders. And what I'm going to say is, I think the story was actually pretty interesting, and I thought they did some cool things. I will say, some of the conversations, though, it's really kind of hard to figure out where they're going, so when you're choosing your responses, it's like, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing with this. We're gonna find out. Which does lead to some actually cool and interesting discussions, and I'm bringing this up in the writing part because I just think that's actually kind of well and interesting writing in a game like this. The story itself, I think, is good and it pulls you through the game. I don't think it's necessarily the strongest story I've ever experienced. I do think some of the characters are actually really interesting, and getting to talk to them and hear their backstory and all of that jazz, I think is a good addition to the game and really does help grow the universe. Now we'll move on to the audio. Now let's get into the audio, and the music in this game is really good. I really enjoyed it. I think it works very well whether you're exploring, whether you're in the city, whether you're in combat, whatever. I think the music worked well. As for the voiceover work, I think the voiceover work is well done. I think they provide a good variety and the actors really do a good job bringing life to their characters. There's definitely some voices you're gonna recognize. And the sound effects are also very well done, whether it's the magic, the swords, the monsters, just everything going on, towns, whatever is going on. I think they do a good job with the sound effects, bringing that all to life. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a first-person action RPG. And yes, I have seen it all over the place. It's getting compared heavily to Skyrim, which I do understand the comparison, although I don't think it's an entirely fair comparison. And when thinking about those two, there are actually things that they do in Avowed that I prefer over Skyrim considerably. Specifically the map. While there is a lot to explore, the map is broken up into smaller chunks, and you have to load in between those chunks, and I actually really liked that because in a game like Skyrim, for example, and there's plenty of other RPGs that are similar, where there's just so much and you can't take 10 steps without finding some new thing to explore. I get lost in those games and I really never get anywhere with the story or anything because I'm just exploring the caves. Whereas in Avowed, those caves aren't just slathered all over your map. You do stumble upon them, but they don't pop up as readily, so it's harder to get distracted by them, as well as the smaller chunks make it feel a little less daunting of a task to get from point A to point B. Now at the beginning you choose kind of your class, which is more of your character's history than anything, because there aren't really set classes. You can equip any weapon you want whenever you want. You can respec yourself, which I did to kind of cheese my way through a battle I didn't want to deal with, so I fucked with my stats beforehand so that I could get through the conversation and prevent a fight. But I started out as like a battle mage running around with a sword. Later I switched to like my spell book and a wand, which the wand has nothing to do with the spell book. It just kind of blasts ice in my case. But that is one of the interesting things, is there are magic attacks that are more neutral, and then there are like your elemental attacks, which are coming out of a spell book. And that's interesting and kind of sucks at the same time. It can limit your spells, but the spells out of the spell book, if I didn't say it, are specifically elemental, lightning, ice, fire. There are some other ones attached to that, like the staff that drains life and spectral arrows and crap like that. And I overall went magic for the most part. I did do some melee because I found a dope ass sword that set things on fire. But beyond that, you also have your companions following you around, and they're not just mules like in Skyrim. They're actually companions. You can't have them carry anything, and you also can't give them as many commands as I'd like. But in combat, they will participate. Kai was like a ranged dude. Giada was like a magic gal with healing abilities. You can mix and match them, and you can find what works best for you. Now, as for the commands thing, I wish you could command them to like follow or wait or things like that, because there were times where I'd be going through trapped areas and I could put down ice so that the water wouldn't be electrified for me because I'd be walking over ice. Well, my idiot companions would go through and take a bunch of electrical damage and get all charged up and explode in electricity, which was obnoxious as all hell. So they really need to fix that. And I'm going to say this now, I'm not going to go into every little thing that happens in this game and every little thing you can do. It works like pretty much every RPG like this that you would think. There's crafting, you can upgrade weapons, you can cook, you can do things like that. Although there are not specifically skills that you'll level up with that, but it's there nonetheless. You do level up through quests and defeating enemies with XP. You put in your attribute points, you upgrade your spells or melee or whatever. They do kind of break it into classes, but you don't necessarily have to limit yourself to a specific class. There are a good number of side quests and they fit well into the world, but they boil down to your basic kinds of side quests, bounty hunting, which I had an obnoxious glitch with where the game told me that I couldn't collect my bounty because I was missing one of the tokens, but I'd killed everything there. And then later, like a half mile away on the riverbank, I found the missing item that was well outside of the area it was supposed to be in. I'm glad I finished that, but that was really weird and glitchy. But back to it, there's your fetch quests, there's your go talk to this guy quest, there's your hey, I can't do this without this kind of quest, all of that crap. I do think the economy is a little rough, man. Buying some better, like, spell books in my case, those things get pricey, and I seem to always be broke. I don't know if it was just a me thing. Probably just a me thing. But like I said, it works like an action RPG. It works like basically every action RPG that you've played, which isn't a bad thing. And I think it works well enough in its own way that it is somewhat unique, but it doesn't stray too far from the path, in my opinion. One thing I do have to bitch about in the combat, though, is the enemies seem to just always warp around the fucking screen. And I don't know if that's a visual thing, but like most of their attacks seem to be lunging fucking attacks. So like you're backing away, you're dodging, you're like 15 feet away, and suddenly they're up in your face, and it kind of sucks and made the combat at times feel very unbalanced. Let's get into the controls, and this is one of the worst parts of the game for me personally. As a spellcaster using the spellbook, you have to hold down the left trigger, and then you use the face buttons. The problem is those face buttons all have dual purposes, and holding down the left trigger, you have to hold it down for not that long, but long enough that you might want to try and jump or dodge or crouch, or you might be trying to cast the spell right away and you may accidentally jump, dodge, or crouch, or you have to let go of the button to dodge, which puts you in danger in combat. It's just not a great mapping system, and it leads to a lot of issues. I also had some issues where I would go into menus and the game would think I was still using the right stick even though I wasn't, and I'd have to wiggle the right stick so that I could actually operate the menu or exit the menu. It was weird. When it comes to aiming and moving, it works well enough. When you're just trying to melee, it responds well. I think just when you add the spell casting and how it kind of double maps buttons at that point, that starts to become a problem and doesn't function as well as I would like. The radial wheel for the companions, giving them attack commands, I think that works very well. I was actually very happy with that because it can also give you a little break in combat. And then we've got the graphics and visuals, and I think it's a beautiful game in its own right. I don't think it's the greatest looking thing I've ever seen, but I do think it's beautiful, although I'm gonna say it right now. Your character is what they call a godlike, which means you have plants growing out of your goddamn face, and that just grossed me out for some reason. It could be like The Last of Us, and I immediately associate plants growing out of the face as like clickers and infected from that, but either way, it grossed me out, and it wasn't just me. I showed it to one of my friends, and she thought it was gross as hell too. Fortunately, however, there is an option so that you don't see the plants growing out of their face, which I definitely appreciated. Going beyond that, I actually really enjoyed the world that they built. I know it takes place in the Pillars of Eternity world. I haven't played those, but I have played this, and I actually really thought it was a cool world. I think the living lands with the different biomes are really well done. Whether you're in the forest or you're in the desert or just whatever, the city, all of that, I think it's beautiful. The coastal region was really cool. I think the water in the game looks pretty damn good. But I think the plants and just walking around and seeing the animals, but then the monsters as well, they all fit so very well into this world, which is also bright and colorful, which I enjoyed. And then there's the characters. I think the characters are well done. I think your companions are obviously the more unique looking characters. But going from town to town and seeing the different garb of the different characters there and the different populace in those areas, like you can kind of see who they are and what they're meant to be and kind of represent. You got your fancy pants scientists, you got your like militarized group, etc. But when you see that, it really fits those areas as well. And it helps, again, just breathe more life into this world. I think the magic effects were really cool, and I thought the combat effects were really cool. I did have a couple of weird visual glitches where like shrubs and like grass were kind of flickering. They weren't meant to be, but they were flickering, and that was unpleasant. But also there was one area where I was just kind of running through and I saw just like a window through the like texture in the world, and I could just see the hollow underneath essentially, as well as a few floating items here or there. But I think it's well done. I think the animations are well done in combat, and I think the animations for facial expressions are well done, and they help obviously bring your companions to life and the other characters in the world to life. I didn't have any like crazy major game destroying glitches. It is a very big open world type game, so it's going to run into some glitchy areas, but I didn't have anything that really took me out of it or was really destructive. There were just a few things that I noticed. So to get into the wrap up, I enjoyed Avowed quite a bit. I actually enjoyed how it separated itself from a lot of bigger action RPGs. I don't think it's a perfect game. I think there's definitely room for growth and improvement and patching. Now, right now it's $70, and I quite frankly don't think it's worth that much right now, just due to the issues and due to things that still need fixing, quite frankly. And I mean, some core things like I mentioned with spellcasting and just other unbalanced things. 50, 60 I would be more comfortable with than full 70. It is free on Game Pass as of recording, so I definitely think that makes it worth checking out right now. If you don't have to pay for it, yeah, then go play it. But if you're gonna buy it at $70, I can't say yes to that. Not right now. Okay, in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, have you played Pillars of Eternity? What do you think of it? Should I play it? Any of those questions. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.